Welcome back to Just SA, the Climate Justice Sessions. I'm your host, Sentle Nell, and today we're joined by Boitumelo Molete, who's the Congress of South African Trade Unions, COSATU's Social Development Policy Coordinator and co-lead on climate change and just transition in the COSATU Policy Unit. We're talking all things around labor unions and the just energy transition, the role that COSATU plays in supporting workers, but also the understanding of climate justice as part of trade unions. Welcome to Just SA. Boitumelo, hello.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Thank you so much for coming to Just SA. We really appreciate you being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
So I think just to kick some things off and for the benefit of our community, please can you tell us a bit about yourself, what you do, as well as COSATU's role around climate justice?
Sure. So my name is Boitumelo Molete. I'm a young woman. I'm not young any longer. I'm a young woman.
You are young.
I was born and raised in Soweto. And I currently work for COSATU as the Social Development Policy Coordinator. I work mainly on COSATU's social policy at a national level. Mm-hmm. So one of the programs on my desk includes, just transition and climate change. I also represent COSATU on the Presidential Climate Commission as a commissioner. So I'm there representing the interests of labor. I represent COSATU also at NETLAC, which is our social dialogue institution. Then the Development Chamber, basically also lobbying for a worker-centered policy framework, lobbying and agreement. So I basically, I'm getting so nervous.
Okay.
I sit at NETLAC, I sit at the PCC. I also represent COSATU in the Just Energy Transition Funding Platform as a committee advisory member. And they're also with the interests of workers. So COSATU in 2009 went into Congress and they started deliberating about climate change as a concept at the time.
Holistically.
And when COSATU was deliberating, it was taken into Congress in 2011 and adopted. So we adopted a policy and titled it A Just Transition to a Low Carbon and Climate Resilient Economy. At that time, what COSATU was saying was that workers need to be engaged in these discussions because climate change was becoming an apparent reality and all workers were being affected by it. And we needed to see and conceptualize how it is that we'd address it. But the main issue there was that workers must be engaged. Yes. We took that forward through the years and we used that policy document as a base to advocate for worker inclusivity in the climate discussions. And that's what kind of gave us more light into what we need to do in terms of responding to the climate adversities that workers were facing across sectors. And simply, you'll hear me speak about a just transition and not a just energy transition. And this is because COSATU believes that this is a multi-sectoral transition and we need to be cognizant of the fact that all sectors are going to be affected by this transition. So we built up our work. We took the policy to provinces, we took it to our locals, and we used that policy to conceptualize, yes, but also have workers talk about climate change because it's so abstract. What is climate change? Is it the weather? And we wanted workers to move beyond climate change being just about weather patterns. And I think we did that very successfully through the years. Post the policy document, and this is where we kind of offset our work on climate change. In 2022, we went into Congress with a solid document, which we titled Just Transition Blueprint for Workers. In that blueprint, what COSATU does is that it articulates that a just transition is, yes, happening, but workers need to be central in the transition. We profiled 3 sectors. And that is not because those 3 sectors are the only sectors that are going to go through transitioning, but we profiled mining, we profiled agriculture, and we profiled transport to try to get workers in those particular sectors because that's where we're seeing the rapid changes to engage in the discussions. And I think that was a moment in which we started having demands, core demands. what must the transition look like?
Yes.
We need social protection. We need job guarantees. We need skilling and reskilling of workers in the sector and workers that are coming into the sector. We need to find adequate pathways for workers to transition safely and workers to transition in a way that will not disrupt their lives. And that is what the blueprint did. And I think it's a key document because outside of the sectors that we profiled, all the other sectors within COSATU started talking about it.
Okay.
What are the changes that are coming in finance? What are the changes that are coming in public sector? And we do that and we continue to lobby with that blueprint as a core principle of us articulating that workers are engaged, we have the solutions, we are on the plant level. If you're going to be having any changes in those sectors, whether it's at the sector level or the workplace level, there needs to be involvement, there needs to be dialogue, there needs to be adequate protection, and we have to have workers part of it.
So I think for a lot of people, COSATU is synonymous with ensuring workers' rights, but also making sure that the labor movement is entrenched in whatever policy and regulation that South Africa has. But I'm just fascinated, while there's an agreement and understanding on the just energy transition, and it's multi-sectoral from what you just shared, is there a thorough understanding from a worker's perspectives on why it needs to take place and why it has to be segmented in different sectors?
I think the understanding is there. Okay. And that's what we did with the rolling out of the policy documents that we've established. And we have subsequent policy documents after the blueprint that we also use to kind of have workers be conscious of what is happening. Yeah. For us, I don't think it's a matter of, is there a transition happening? It's that there is a transition that is happening. Yes. And workers are aware. They feel the pinch at the level of the workplace. They see the changes. And I think there is an overall broader understanding. It's very odd that people would think that workers are against the transition.
Why so?
I think it's odd because these are people that are day to day having to approach and engage this big change in their lives. If a worker in mining is supposed to transition through a pathway into agriculture, changes their whole dynamic. Yes. They go into a very different sector, a very precarious sector, from a very legislated and very protected sector like mining into agriculture will not only change your take home. Yes. It will change your conditions of life. Yeah. Your basic conditions of employment will change. It's just an overhaul of someone's life. And I don't think anyone would be neglecting the fact that this is going to take place.
But I think there's also the human element, right? And to your point, if you were always established as a miner and that's a legacy that you always know, the shift, I think, can be a little jarring and overwhelming, you know? So what support mechanisms do you offer workers as they go into different sectors or even require reskilling?
I think for us, firstly, and you'll see, Sentle, if you look through COSATU's submission on the JET-IP, which we critiqued quite a lot, the first is that we strongly believe that reskilling and upskilling, including education, is central to this. Yes. And there needs to be adequate investment in skills. If you don't invest in skills, then you can't actually expect anyone to get into that, because how is it that they're going to participate in a sector that they have no skills for? So that's the first thing that we speak about, the importance of having skills as part of the transition. But also for us, it's that workers need to be supported in ways that are beyond just bread and butter. Yes. You know, there are issues of housing, there are issues of education, not of the worker, but their beneficiaries, their kids. So you need to be able to support the worker. And when we speak about social protection for us, it's not about a grant. We're not referring to grants. We're saying this person needs medical attention. Medical aid needs to be considered. Their housing, like all of the socioeconomic needs of the worker need to be incorporated into what we then will call a just transition. And if you don't accommodate the worker's socioeconomic needs and the immediate needs as person, their wants, you're basically pulling them into a situation where they'll be destitute. Yeah. So for us, those need to be adequately captured. And we propose in the blueprint that this be done through collective bargaining agreements.
Okay.
So this is between worker and employer. The trade union obviously will negotiate at the bargaining council level, but those agreements need to capture quite specifically the needs of workers. And we need to make sure that those collective bargaining agreements are able to be crossed over to all workers. Because that's the other thing, right? When people assume that one is a member of an affiliate of COSATU, they think COSATU only just negotiates for their members. But quite frankly, all agreements will then affect all workers. So we need to make sure that these agreements are actually capturing everyone's voice. And that's why we also attempt to also speak to economic diversification, where we then make consideration for the informal sector. So for us, it's not just about our members. It's about people. It's about the working class people being able to transition safely, being able to transition in a way that will not leave them at a worse off situation. A collective bargaining agreements, sectoral agreements as well.
Yes, because there's sector codes that are also tied to it, right? Yes.
Sectoral agreements are very important as well. And we need to start beefing up our engagements there because, I mean, we don't have quite a huge delegation of people lobbying at NETLAC. But we are trying because at the level of NETLAC, we have all 4 federations that are in South Africa represented. Well, I will admit that COSATU has taken the broader lead in representing workers, but there are other federations that were there and we're trying to push for worker representation. And I think the one big thing that I'm looking forward to that we're doing now at NETLAC through the Labour Market Chamber is speaking about a code of good practice on just transition.
Okay.
So this code of good practice will be a legislated piece that will allow for us to speak about what a transition should look like for a worker.
And would this be taken to, the mining houses or proliferated across different industries?
This is going to be exactly like the Labour Relations Act would be. So in the Labour Relations Act, in the Basic Conditions of Employment Act, in the Employment Equity Act, there are various codes that are spoken of, like the Sexual Harassment Code of Good Practice. We'll have that Code of Good Practice as a legislative piece, and it will apply to all workers. This is where we set the tone.
Yes.
And I think, alongside the PCC and other bodies that are sitting at NETLAC, that guidance into having that code of good practice is going to unlock how we articulate ourselves as workers. And it's also going to support papers like the Presidential Climate Commission's framework on just transition for South Africa. So this is basically South Africans all across constituencies, business, government, labor, and community sitting and agreeing that this is what a legislated transition should look like. I'm really looking forward to it. I mean, there are a lot of pushbacks at NETLAC.
Yeah, and I want us to talk about that because what fascinates me is that JET, by its nature, is multi-sectoral, right? We're saying we are all transitioning into a low carbon economy for the benefit of our country. But the pushback and some of the policy levers can get a little tricky. And we've had the PCC here, the Presidential Commission here, and they're clear in terms of their mandate and what they do in as far as being an interlocker. But what has been some of that pushback from a regulatory standpoint and a policy standpoint? And what has the pushback been from some of your constituencies?
I think from a regulations perspective, I think business is not really keen on negotiating. And I mean, the pushback for us when we analyzed was mainly from them and a bit of government. I think we're not at the level of NETLAC. They probably believe we're not at the level to which we should be, pushing for a code of good practice. Sure. And maybe we still need more engagement as constituencies to get to a consensus of what this transition should look like and what measures in which we need to put into place. But I mean, I think that the difficulties are very small.
Okay.
And for us, we always want to go back to the ILO's definition of a just transition because at that level, all constituencies agree. It needs to be just, it needs to be inclusive, it needs to ensure that no one is left behind, and it needs to incorporate all the sectors. So I think we need more dialogue to unlock those bit of misunderstandings. But I don't think they're major. That's the other thing. I don't think they're major, because when you see the PCC commissioners, it's like broadly across all sectors. We have faith-based, we have youth, we have gender. So there needs to be a point where we agree. And I said this in one panel I sat in, I think it was the one with DPRU, where I said, you know, this needs to stop being a project. You know, it's not another project to be financed. Can we take this as a South Africa agenda so that we're all represented and that we're all able to then respond to the changes adequately, and that it's not just a foreign imposed concept. And I'm hoping that we'll get there. I mean, Labour has been able to participate in these discussions. And if you see the historical aspects of the just transition and you see where it started, I mean, it started with workers. You know, it's 1979 in the US, and workers in mining, they were like, hey, change is coming. How do we then prepare ourselves?
Exactly.
So this is just us having to prepare more. Let's talk more. Let's prepare more. And let's be considerate of the actual impact it will have. You know, we see what happened in Komati. We see what happened in Hendrina, Grootvlei. You know, there's so many unjust transitions that we saw. And it's for us to actually look at that as learnings and make sure that we don't replicate it in any other sector or any other power plant. And that will take a lot of engaging.
You know, part of the work that we both do is a sort of intersectional work, right? That says, okay, we'll look at JET, we'll look at the transition holistically, but within there are issues that relate to education, that relate to health, that relate to the well-being of a society. And I'm fascinated what your complexity looks like in that intersectional role, because it's developmental objectives that are aligned to the work that COSATU does. But how do you weave all of them together? How do you ensure that there's an inculcation of the importance of education within JET, the issues around health and safety within JET? How do you weave all of those developmental objectives together?
I think, for us, it's always been clear that this is a developmental agenda. You know, this needs to make sure that we are also redressing the inequalities that we've seen through the years. And for us, because we're a mandate-based organization, right? So we have to get a mandate from the membership. But what we do, especially from a policy perspective, because that's where we start our thinking, we're the think tank. And what we've done is that we've built on the policy that we've had. So alongside the policy on climate and the blueprints, we've also wanted to clearly articulate that there are the intersectionalities. We then built it up into, we have a gender toolkit on just transition. We have a toolkit for young workers on just transition. We also have a toolkit for educators and organizers to then speak to what a just transition looks like. So we appreciate that there are other parts of the transition that we can't neglect and we should be considerate of. And we have quite a strong gender approach as COSATU. I mean, we have a gender structure that is voted into and mandated to speak to gender. So it has its own constitutional leadership of COSATU. So issues of gender are taken up in a manner in which we're able to ensure that that leadership is able to go with something that is solid. So what we try to do through policy is make sure that we pronounce on the importance of young workers engaging in just transition, because there's that just transition green jobs element that we need to focus on. With the level of unemployment in South Africa, youth unemployment is at a staggering rate. We need to start approaching that. There's another intersectionality, especially in thinking about the future of work, where there's a 4IR discussion that we need to start having. There's a lot of digitalization, mechanization. Where are we with that? And what we're trying to do is firstly to highlight that this is important that we focus on. Young workers are the future, and what the planet that we're fighting for to secure is going to be. I'm retiring in a couple, like 30 years or whatever. I won't be here forever, you know. So they also need to start thinking in that manner. And for us, we're trying to say, education is important. And for us, education is not it's not just university education. It's not just formalized education, recognition of prior learning, vocational learning. We try to make sure that in our policy briefings, we make sure that workers are able to find themselves in what we're trying to speak of. And the transition is taking place, whether we resist, whether we try to block the discussions. These things are really progressing. Yeah. And it's for us to be ready by the time they get presented to us. And our work as COSATU mainly, I've been saying a lot of this, is that I think we are good with the policy. We've written the policy. We know that there is a transition taking place. We know that workers need to be engaged. But how do we implement? And that's where my work is right now.
Yeah, I think the implementation part is fascinating to me, because ultimately you represent workers and constituencies. What are they saying? And it's not for you to be the voice of the voiceless, because they also have that aptitude. But what are they saying? What are their concerns? What are their sort of touch points?
I think the one major concern is the pace of the transition. And this comes strongly from the National Union of Mine Workers, and they've been very strong in saying that, even, approaching me at a level of the COSATU Climate Change Committee and saying, Comrade Boitumelo, we hear you. We see what you're saying, but what's the rush? Why are we not afforded the opportunity to ready ourselves? And that, for me, is the one major concern that workers come with. And that's one that we take very seriously. And even when we have our engagements, we start to say, yes, the transition should take place. It is taking place. It's beyond our control. I mean, it's a reality. It's a reality. We're confronted with it. But why is the rush? And you need to start saying, comrades, from the level of the UNFCCC, these are the agreements. This is why we need to move to net zero. This is why we need to transition, so that we are actually also having a quality of life that's decent. Because, I mean, with all of the adversities that are climate related, with all of the emissions that are actually affecting, the transition in its entirety, we need to be conscious of that. Because we can't put a plaster on it and hope it goes away. So we try by all means to also, even in our engagements in the UNFCCC processes, to take workers along. So I was recently in Bonn in the climate conference. And while we're there speaking about Just Transition, the Just Transition working program, how that needs to speak about labor rights, needs to speak about decent jobs, needs to speak about the future of work. Let's also be conscious of that. People on the ground see it very differently to the more broader international holistic approach. So I go into those international conferences. I go into COP. I mean, we're preparing for COP 30 in Bloem. And the basis of that is I need to go back and say, comrades, this is what's being said internationally. How do we prepare ourselves better? This is what's coming. There are a lot of discussions that took place at the SB that we now are also trying to engage. The unilateral trade agreements discussion, the whole, Global South wanting to pronounce also and being part of the discussions, climate finance as well. So I go into those international discussions and I need to come back and account and say, this is what's being said. And this is how we're responding. But also have workers part of that process. I do that through the Climate Change Committee, but we strongly believe, and COSATU is a democratic federation. No one makes a unilateral decision. So I need to go back and be able to speak to that. And the responses are different, right? But workers are conscious of what's happening. They follow these international discussions.
There's an awareness.
They follow the discourse in South Africa, what is happening on green hydrogen, whether it's the Green Hydrogen Summit, whether it's PCC having its own webinars. But the main thing that they also say is that, where are we? Don't invite us to a webinar. Speak to us, consult with us.
Get us in the room.
Get us in the room, and you don't have to have a seat. I mean, you can have a seat, but what are you doing there? Are they having a meal and you're just looking? What's happening?
To tick a box?
So we don't want to tick boxes, and that's what we try to do, and that's what I try to do in my approach on my work. But I don't think we should take too lightly the capacity that workers have in relation to this discussion.
It's fascinating work, and I think applauding as well, because you hold the duality of making sure that the policy gets implemented, but also the inherent voices that are required to inform that policy. So it's interesting work for me. And we're in Women's Month, and it's an exciting time for the country. It's buzzing, and you're led by the formidable leader, which is Zingiswa Losi. And I think part of the work that you shared on was around gender responsiveness and the gender desk that COSATU has. I'm interested in making sure that gender is at the forefront and women have equity in as far as JET. What does that work look like for you?
President Zingiswa Losi is an amazing person. I love her. I always enjoy preparing and assisting her in her engagements. So she's also a co-chair on the International Energy Agency's Labour Council. So she does a lot of climate and just transition work, and she's an advocate for just and inclusive transition. So on that front, I strongly believe that we're able to put that voice across, especially internationally. We're also very clear, like I said, in the toolkit and in our policy. Our first policy spoke to gender and how women are usually the ones that are bearing the brunt of climate adversities. So for us, the work going forward is making sure that issues of women are carried forward in the policy, issues relating to unpaid care work, issues relating to just safety of women in the transition and how it is that they need to be protected from, we all know that women are mostly marginalized. And we must make sure that in our articulation and in our policy briefings, we're clear in that women need to be considered in as much as youth have to be considered. So for us, that work looks like championing for a very gender responsive agenda. And I'm happy that the PCC is also taken this forward. And there is a gender advisory committee that is convening under the PCC, where women, queer people are able to then speak to what they want to see the gender chapter look like. It was a bit neglected in the beginning. I will admit, the advisory committee was established this year. But for me, it needs to be women taking the forefront.
Absolutely.
And women informing what it is that they need for this transition to be equitable. These issues go across the board, including OHS. Occupational health and safety is also included then. If you saw quite recently, the National Union of Mine Workers had a demonstration at a mine where women were handled very poorly. And we need to start acknowledging that those things still happen. And we can, through the Just Transition gender chapter, address those issues as well. And it's an indictment on us to make sure that that is responsive and that women are not left also, at a disadvantage in the long run. Because if those little considerations are not done, then I don't know.
Then it's not worth it, right? Then it's
absolutely not.
It's a waste of time, but there's also lack of thinking on what it looks like long term. But I want to get a bit personal, Boitumelo. I want to sort of understand why this work is important to you. Why is climate justice important to you as Boitumelo? Why do you think there needs to be a thorough, in-depth understanding on its urgency? And what does it look like in your personal life, in you championing this work?
This is a
loaded question.
It's a very loaded question, but I think for me, firstly, I mean, like I said, I grew up in Soweto, and little things will make you aware. And now I was raised by, my mom worked in retail her entire life. So I was raised in a proper working class family. And I saw the challenges that came with that, from access to infrastructure when it comes to transport. It was horrible having to commute to and from work for my mom. I also experienced it at some point. And I mean, when we speak about a just transition in transport, we then want to see a redressed and a better functioning public transport system, which will, benefit a whole lot of people sitting in areas that are very far from business districts, So for me, it's more about wanting to see a change in the society. In my immediate setting, wanting to see people being able to work in areas that were not easily accessible prior. Having adequate skills for people to be able to then, transition into decent work. So climate justice for me means that we're able to move ahead as people, as Black people, to be precise, I know a lot of people say that, this is not going to change everything. We're putting too much faith in this transition, solving South Africa's problems. But I think this is our opportunity.
Absolutely.
I think this is our opportunity to actually fix what's broken, but also try to create a better world and a better society for our people, better living conditions, access to energy, access to water, clean, decent water. Because I mean, open your tap. How many of us buy water?
You have to lift up that glass and make sure, is it gray? Is it white? What's happening?
How many of us buy water?
Yes.
That is so simple.
Yeah.
And through the transition, we can be able to somehow remedy that. The energy one is very close to my heart because my mom is still in Soweto and she still experiences load reduction.
Sure.
Load reduction for them is a reality. Well, I'm in a better position now, but back home I know that it could be like from 5 to 10 p.m. on a random Tuesday and my mom, I can't get a hold of her. It's dark, it's unsafe, and it's just not, it's not okay that some people are still having to experience such things. And it's not okay for us to forget that there are still people that don't have proper sanitation. They just don't, and it's a reality that we need to start thinking about. And I think through adequate measures into considering a just transition for South Africa, we can be able to address some of these issues and hopefully see this equity.
Yeah.
Addressing the triple challenges of South Africa. And those are clear. We know South Africa is one of the most unequal countries in the world. We know that unemployment is real, that poverty is real. So how do we have a better, proudly SA, just transition? That involves everyone, including workers.
Everybody.
Including workers in the sectors, workers that are still, in the making in universities and TVET colleges. Let's have everyone move forward and let's have this agenda that will not be a replica of Germany or Denmark or whatever it may be. Let's invest in our people.
And make it uniquely South African,
Absolutely.
As a parting shot for someone that's listening, for someone that's curious, for someone that's like, okay, I'm slowly understanding, but what can I do? I'm just a worker. I'm just a woman. I'm just a young person. What's your parting shot to them?
I think for me, it's that everybody has a role to play. The science is there. Engage in the science. We absolutely have to engage in the science. But also there are direct impacts that we feel. And for the fact that you still have to go through those without being secure in knowing that you'd be able to participate in it, I think you need to start not only thinking about it, but engaging it. These discussions are not high level because they affect you directly. So you need to start placing it and putting it to yourself. And I mean, organizations like the PCC have open webinars. You can educate yourself. You can engage in those. And I'm happy to have any additional engagements I'm very active on my LinkedIn, and I speak a lot about the work that I do. I profile the events that I go to, and I'm always happy to share the space because it's not mine. It's not for me to keep. It's for me to be able to engage in those high level discussions and bring it back to the people. And I'm always trying to do that. We have the COSATU website that's very active, and I have quite a number of documents that I've shared with our communications and media team, and they are there. If you find that you have access to the soft copy of the blueprint and there's a chapter that you don't understand, for now, I'm always happy to speak about that. I've had people approaching me doing their PhDs, and I'm like, but always happy to share information, always happy to open up and be real about it, share the challenges, the difficulties. I mean, even internally, it's not an easy discussion to have with unions in sectors that are largely affected. But we try to reach consensus because that's the nature of South Africans. There's that sense of ubuntu and a sense of wanting to find consensus and find each other. So I'm happy to engage further, and I'm available to have these learnings, I mean, I sit on a lot of high-level advisory committees, both domestically and internationally, and I can't keep that information to myself. It's a lot. So let's engage, let's share. Come to COSATU House if you want, more information on how workers are trying to speak to this and respond to the transition. But I'm happy to also make COSATU accessible. Yes. Because young workers, young people find it a bit odd to connect with unions. I mean, the research is there, but I think just as a young person myself, to say that that's a space that we need to get into ourselves. Let's
get together. Let's caucus. Boitumelo, thank you so much for your generosity, for your time, and for really helping us unpack the role of labor unions, and particularly what COSATU does within the just space. I think what stuck out for me is the fact that there's an inherent policy mechanism at place around the just energy transition. So thank you for the incredible work that you're doing and for your leadership in this space.
Thank you very much. I appreciate this. This is cool. Thank you.
High five. Awesome. So thank you so much for joining us on Just to Say, the Climate Justice Sessions. What a rich engagement. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share on your favorite platforms, and also send us suggestions on what you'd like to come up next on the show. My name is Sentle, and have a good one.